One of the things that you know from the literature on the liability of newness is that new organizations quite often succumb pretty quickly to their context, to problems that arise. And you could see this, in a sense, as an issue of how rapidly people learn. And if you frame it like that, if you frame it as a learning problem, then it's applicable across probably everything that any of you in this room study. Right? How could you be in management? How could you be in a business school and not believe that people learn? But how could you study strategy and entrepreneurship without having an interest in how rapidly and efficiently people learn? So one of the issues that arises is whether what we're observing is the impossibility, perhaps, for many nascent entrepreneurs to learn quickly enough to keep up with the challenges they face. That's an open question. Now, one of the issues you have to face immediately in trying to use the Stinchcomb argument. How many of you have read Stinchcomb in the original, by the way? How many of you know the Stinchcomb liability of nudis? Certainly must have been forced it upon you by your professors, right? You've all been forced to read it as a student. I hope you have. Am I right? Okay. So many of you were forced to read it. Probably some of you enjoyed it. I don't know. But you know from this experience that, well, I should say, my interpretation when you read Stinchcomb, he's really talking about not established organizations. He's talking about the early days. He isn't talking about new organizations. He's talking about the organizing effort. Right? Most of what people do when they study entrepreneurship these days is start with new organizations, and they watch them subsequently. But that won't do if you're going to carry on in the spirit of Stinchcomb, because his arguments about the problems that these organizations, these efforts face, have to do with before you get organized. How do you get organized? So as we point out in this, in the JBV paper, and then another paper coming out in what I consider sort of my house journal, Entrepreneurship Research Journal. It'll be out sometime this summer. That's actually, I think the title is going to be something like, what did Stinchcomb really mean? We point out that people who've used available data sets have just missed the boat. Right? If you try to study the liability of newness and you use archival data, or you survey people listed in a trade association catalog, or you use Dun & Bradstreet, any of those, you're using data that has been collected on organizations that have made it. They've gotten through the point that Stinchcomb talked about. So as we point out in the JBV paper and then this forthcoming ERJ paper, we haven't learned much about the liability of newness from those studies. What you really need to study this problem is data on nascent entrepreneurs, which I'm going to talk about today. And I'll ask you to think about the problem from the point of view of a nascent entrepreneur or a team of nascent entrepreneurs. What are they trying to do? Well, they face uncertainty, huge uncertainty. And so what I say is happening in the organizing process is they're trying to gain control over uncertainty, control over resources, control over boundaries, control over the routines they need. These are all organizing issues. They're not issues necessarily, and we'll come back to this point again and again, it's not issues about money. That's one of the things people don't understand. Entrepreneurship is not about money. Entrepreneurship is about organization. Creating a firm is about organizing. It's about mobilizing resources. It's about protecting those resources once you've acquired them from use by others. So that means you need boundaries. You need create a bounded entity. And you need ways of saving the good things you develop from one day to the next through the kinds of routines you develop. Those are all organizational issues. Money is important, but your seriously underestimating the problems if you think that money is the solution to entrepreneurship. Money helps, but money can't substitute for effective organizing strategies. My colleague for more than a decade at Cornell, Carl Weick, imprinted this upon me. Right? It's called the social psychology of organizing, right? Not the social psychology of financing. Right? It's called the social psychology of organizing. It's about getting organized. And that's what we're going to look at here. So we have to satisfy the people who think that it's about money, you'll see we're going to bring in financial performance. We actually know about, do they have revenue? Does revenue exceed the costs? Do they have enough revenue to cover not just their costs of running, but also cover salaries? So we have that, and we're going to show that our results are robust to the inclusion of financial performance. If you've studied entrepreneurial ventures, you've seen this. Sometimes when a venture looks like it's going to become successful, take Facebook. How many have seen the movie Facebook? How many of you read about Mark Zuckerberg being sued by the people who said they also helped him? Okay, yeah. So why did that happen? Because there wasn't any clear agreement on who got the spoils. Right? And so when the consequence is, it's cost Mark Zuckerberg a lot of money. They've settled, I think, although one of the guys who settled came back and asked for more. It's not going to get it. But one of the things that happens in a successful venture is that people argue, okay, how much of this is mine, how much of this is yours? So signing an agreement on ownership takes that out of the